Jackie Dean.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. National supports this bill, the Hutt City Council Graffiti Removal Bill, and a number of speakers have noted today and throughout the course of the Select Committee consideration and also in the first reading speech that graffiti on private property within public view has a negative impact on anybody who sees it, whether or not you're a visitor to the particular town or neighbourhood. And I know you see the graffiti day after day after day, and you just go, and it has a negative impact. But we saw recently, Mr Speaker, up in Counties Manukau, a really good example of how graffiti can, one, do huge damage to a neighbourhood, but then subsequent to that, once it's been dealt with and a bit of community input as well, can have a really beneficial impact on a community. And the Law and Order Select Committee did a visit to Counties Manukau. We went to a neighbourhood which comprised of a liquor store, a dairy and a takeaway store, and not only was the whole little block of shops covered in graffiti upon graffiti upon graffiti, but it was also dirty and there was rubbish all around, the grass was growing, and it was not a good place for the community. There were houses all around, but we were told by the community constables that children going to get something after school or going on an errand for mum to the dairy were prone to be stood over by various gangs and groups of people, and it wasn't actually a very safe place for them. So together the police and the local community tidied up the graffiti with the cooperation of the local shopkeepers, and that community input and critically tidying up the graffiti on those buildings has seen a complete change in that community. And the afternoon we were there, it was after school, and there were kids going into the dairy and buying ice creams and the things that kids buy from dairies after school all around New Zealand. Maybe not down south, it's a bit cold at this time of year, but hot chips and that kind of thing. It was the community was restored to something like what it should be, and a large part of that was the removal of the graffiti and the willingness of the community to deal with the problem. And that is what we are seeing in this bill, the Hutt City Council Graffiti Removal Bill, is the local authority who have identified a problem, and good on them, have identified a solution. And so this House supports that approach, and if indeed other local authorities, when this bill has passed through the House, wish to take up the opportunities presented by this local bill, then good on them, who together with their communities can overcome some of the problems presented by graffiti vandalism. And so, as I have said and as the House has demonstrated, this bill has enjoyed wide support in a very collegial passage through the Local Government Select Committee, ably chaired by Nikki Wagner, but also with good input from all members. One of the things that the committee needed to tie down was a good definition of graffiti. So, under the Summary Offences Act of 1981, graffiti vandalism in the act of a person damaging or defacing any building, structure, road, tree, property or other thing by writing, drawing, painting, spraying or etching on it or otherwise marking it without lawful authority and without the consent of the occupier or owner or other person in lawful control. The Select Committee did make a number of recommendations to amend the bill as presented, and one of those was in clause 3, which was to make it very clear that the purpose of this bill was to allow the removal from private property of graffiti that is visible from a public place, so that if any one of us were driving through town or walking along the footpath and that graffiti were visible from the street or the footpath, then the purpose of this bill is to allow the removal from private property of that graffiti, and that took a little bit of working through. As introduced, the bill had a wider, broader effect than really, I believe, was intended by the local authority. We recommended amendments to clause 5 to include a definition of graffiti, which was consistent with the Summary Offences Act. And we also recommended amendments to clauses 6 and 7, which would require the Council to state on the graffiti removal notice the source of the power it relied on, and would require people authorised by the Council to take a copy of the notice served under Clause 6.3 and to carry an adequate form of identification when removing graffiti, so that it was clear to anybody who took notice of what was going on that the person removing the graffiti was empowered to do so. We also recommended deleting Clause 8, which sought or seeks to protect the Council from civil proceedings arising out of actions done in good faith. The reason for that is the committee does not believe that Council employees should be given such protection when other local authority employees are generally not, just applying a little bit of consistency. So, Mr. Speaker, I have noted that graffiti impacts on the image of a city, of a neighbourhood, of a street, of a town negatively. It also has a negative impact on property values, and that is certainly not a good thing for any of us. Many councils have a zero tolerance policy on graffiti. Some remove it for free from private properties, and places like Wellington City Council provide free kits so you can remove it yourself. So there are a lot of options there, but now we are considering this graffiti removal bill. It is a good bill. It takes account of private property rights, it takes account of community interests, and it has enjoyed a lot of support through this House, and I commend it in its second reading.
Andrew Little. Oh.